The Cards survived the Dukes. Let's dive on into it. Welcome on in, welcome on in, welcome on in. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on when and where you are listening in from. I am joined by my fabulous friend, James. Once again, James, the Cards got a win. And there's been a lot of talk about this win.
So I think most of the fan base can agree with me and you both and the take. We really didn't know how to feel about this game throughout. It was the weirdest game ever. The offense was stagnant for most of the game. The defense just constantly was just getting the ball back. The pressure on the defensive line you saw throughout the game, as we'll talk on a little bit more, was something that you had guys last year, but just the raw speed on the edges, it made all the difference. It was different. That's a real football team you played Friday night. You take your wins and move on, as you see on the national scale. Some teams weren't as lucky.
We will talk about that also. But just as a filler in case anyone has been living underneath a rock and for some reason has stumbled upon this YouTube video, Louisville beats James Madison 28-14 on Friday nights. The weather was fine. I know that's been a point of contention with certain people. Absolutely fine weather. You kind of covered the spread. It's one of those weird ones. The spread had moved so much throughout the day. It got as low as 13. I personally got on the Cards at 13.5, so they covered in my book. Other people's books they didn't cover.
I think Brad got it at 12.5. I think it got as low as 12.5 on Friday morning.
I didn't know it went down that low.
I think it closed at 14.5 on some sites, but I think overall it was sitting around 13.5 at kickoff.
Okay. Just my initial thoughts. Originally on Friday night, I was pretty concerned, to be very truthful with you, especially with the offense. The left side of the offensive line looked terrible. Miller Moss did not look good, to say the least. But with a little bit of reflection on watching the games and watching the game a few times over now, I'm still worried, but I'm not concerned, if that makes sense. I know Jeff Braun, he made it a point in his press conference to mention that, hey, they didn't scheme for, engage eights, send in just the entire box and everyone involved. They didn't scheme for that. It's one of those things where, I'm sorry?
I was going to add, I think there was they said the blitz rate for JMU Friday night was like 85% of defensive snaps. They blitzed at least 5.
I believe that. I do. What's concerning for me about that is from a baseline, it's scheming. I get it. You weren't expecting to see it. Your center wasn't able to call it out. Like, that kind of stuff makes sense. What concerns me is that Miller Moss struggled against blitzes at Southern Cal. Now, granted, he didn't have a very good offensive line. Well, the offensive line that we put out there against JMU wasn't very good either, and he struggled against blitz rates. So you're kind of repeating yourself here. Now, I think your offensive line will continue to get better throughout the year, but it was concerning. Along with that, at times, wide receivers had a very hard time getting any sort of separation. And that was across the board. That's Colin Lacey, Chris Bell. That is everybody was having a hard time at certain points. And really, the reason that you won this football game, it comes down to big plays. You were able to make big plays and win the game. You should be able to do that against a school like JMU. You recruit significantly better than them. Big players make big plays that win big football games. But that's why you won. Statistically speaking, you were either outgained or neck and neck with JMU in every single category. And it's a hard thing to say, but it's you question this offense. You do. Especially like when you can't give Isaac Brown the running lanes, that is a major concern in my books. I don't know. What was your initial takeaways from the offense?
So, like you, I've watched the game a couple times now. My initial takeaways after the game Friday, I expressed this in the space on Twitter. I was very concerned with the offensive line. I felt like they were allowing the left side of the defensive line to bend and get to Miller and speed him up a little bit more. And Miller's just not as accurate on the run as some guys we've seen in the past, specifically what Tyler was able to do last year. It's early on, so as I watched it, some of the stuff makes sense, especially after you hear the post game for Jeff. You're not going to have a team that blitzes you that much every week. Honestly, I don't think you play a better defensive line than that until Miami.
Yeah.
So I think that's a positive. I'm very high on how our defensive line played. Cleve Lubin may be the best edge in the ACC right now. Don't get me wrong. It has just been EKU and JMU, but he's just been dominant in both games. He has 3.5 sacks. I think he had 10 sacks on Friday night, and he had a forced fumble that resulted in an A.J. Green touchdown. Secondary-wise, it's coming along. I think Rodney Johnson's a dude back there. I think Holloway has a lot of potential. Safety-wise, you got a bunch of safeties. Last year, on some plays, you question if they were afraid to hit. This year, you do not have to worry about the people coming down and just laying somebody out. JoJo Evans had a couple Friday night where he just lowered his shoulder.
No,
But
I think. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
no, I was going to touch on the wide receivers. I am concerned because you do have some burners in that wide receiver room. Like, I still stand by this is the best wide receiver room we've ever had. And it felt almost at times that the offense was scared to take the top off. And as like Chase Kitty had spoke on in the space we had on Thursday, the night before the game, that's where JMU seems to be the weakest, is like their deep coverage. And I didn't really feel like we took advantage of that. If anything, we kind of played into their scheme. And that's concerning whenever it is a G5 team, even with it being a team like JMU who's a playoff contender this year.
Well, my main, we hit on the well, for defense. Let me do my defense. Man, that's the best defensive performance I've seen from Louisville, probably under Jeff Brown. I mean, Ron English, he's got the guys flying. He's got the D line. The Saquon Clark injury is a massive blow in itself, and it cannot be stated how big of a blow that is. But the secondary looks fine. There's a few positioning issues here and there, but those are growing pains. Those are acceptable. You're not getting beat. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That will work itself out. Safety room is just amazing. I mean, the defense, I mean, I can't sing enough praises for Ron English this week. He called a great game. He had them ready, and it looks like he has the horses there to compete at the ACC level.
One thing that bit us a lot in the butt last year was defensive penalties. It was your guys would make plays, and at the end of a play, after the play's over, 15 yards, other way, first down. Don't get me wrong, penalties were bad week one, but they were mostly offensive. The defense really hasn't beat itself too much outside of the one penalty on Friday on the 4th and 6th. They called a hold that ended up in a touchdown, and I think the second touchdown.
That was a rough call.
Yeah, I think the second touchdown was also a PI call that was a little questionable on if it was catchable. But Don't get me wrong, you're going to get those in college. Overall, though, I'm really happy with the discipline on the defense. It can always get better. You're never going to be perfect. It's the second week of the year. But this defense looks worlds better than last year's to this point.
It does. I mean, for example, the defense has not given up a touchdown on a long field. Every touchdown they've given up has been on a short field because of either special teams or the offense.
And I talked to you and Brad about this on Friday night after the game. And I keep going back to comparing this JMU game. And this JMU team's better than that Jacksonville State team was last year. It just is. It's more competitive. It's more physical on both sides of the ball. But last year, you left Jacksonville State. You won the game by 30. But you let the quarterback run for over 150 yards. And then the second half, you couldn't get Jacksonville State off the field. Unless they just got 2 holding calls and had to punt it because it was 2nd and 30. So you never had really a point in this game. And that's the one advantage I have with this year. It's like a complete 180 with this team. You went into the season last year, the offense was clicking all cylinders from game one. This year, it feels like the offense is going to have to ease its way in a little bit, and the defense is making plays all over the field. I think that's a little bit easier to handle. I think offense can come along. I think you have a really good offense, and you have some really good offensive minds involved in that room. And I think you have the best running back room in the country. I can't express that enough. Like Isaac Brown had over 100 yards against a stacked box all night. Don't get me wrong, 78 yards of that was on one run. But again, they were stacking the box. He had to earn every yard.
Well, the one thing I will say that was probably my biggest concern the entire night, Jeff Brom just got straight out coached. I mean, let's call it what it is. The offensive adjustments were not there. And at a certain point, I understand you make the comment, hey, we weren't prepared for the blitz rate. You got to be able to make game day choices, and you got to be able to make game day adjustments. I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, this is what you should have done. I'm not that type of a guy. But there were clear ways to kind of scheme around what you were saying during the game, and those didn't happen. And that's what really, really concerns me. That game felt like a Brom stinker. That is one of the really bad called games I've seen of Jeff in his entire career. And that stuff just can't happen, man. If you're a realistic playoff aspiration team, you can't do that.
I agree. And the commentators kind of called it out with the blitz rate. We kind of fell into a trap of the run wasn't getting anything but 1 and 2 yards a time. These long developing play action passes where Miller would have to sit back there, but the offensive line wasn't able to hold up because the numbers just weren't there. And Miller was having to toss it on the run. And like I said, Miller's a great thrower of the football, but when you get him on the run, that's whenever the problems can arise. He's got to plant his feet, and I don't blame that on him necessarily on the long play actions. But whenever you know a team's blitzing the way they are, you can't run those long developing plays. You've got to have some dump offs and slants across the field. As you see, they ran a slant as Brad had called out to Manu at halftime, and 75 yards, Chris Bell.
It was wide open. You know, especially with the speed you have in the wideout room, you look at guys like specifically Lacey and Golden and drags, slants, and outs. It's there all day, though. Dude, those guys have the natural given talent to get those there. And when you're going against a very high blitz rate, you know, you got to do that. One more thing I kind of want to hit on. I see a lot of people like free falling about this game, and like I said at the top of the show, I'm concerned. I'm worried, but I'm not concerned. I'm not free falling. At the end of the day, James Madison, and this isn't me doing the whole Cope thing. This isn't me doing the whole Louisville Homer thing. X, Y, Z. You were favored by 13.5 and you cover. That's already a good sign. James Madison is a heck of a football team. They have a legitimate shot to compete for a G5 spot in the college football playoff. Granted, there might be a South Florida road barrier in their way. Some of us talked about that. But they have a chance to compete for a college football playoff spot. I don't see them losing another game on the season, especially if they get the quarterback situation figured out, because they're there and they have a great coaching staff.
Before we touch off this game, one of my last comments is Bob Chesney is the best G5 head coach in college football right now. That staff
currently going, yeah.
Running schemes they were throwing out there are stuff you just don't see. Like they threw some wishbone in there. The way they were able to scheme the fullback to be able to peel off and block the linebacker. And the fact that you held them under 100 yards rushing with kind of rushing attack they have, and they have a legitimate 3-headed monster at the running back room. And on top of that, you paired them with Sluka and Barnett whenever he's going to come along. JMU, if any of your fans are watching this, you all have a ball team. But in this game, our rushing defense, it solidified itself to me. I think our run defense is going to be fine the rest of the year. I don't think you see a team that runs the ball that dynamically as that team because you don't have to play Florida State this year.
Yep. So I guess my final thing, then we'll turn the page officially. Who's your player of the game?
Clev Lubin. I think
without him, it's an easy choice.
It's hard. I don't want to pick the obvious one, but he single-handedly swayed that game. Was back and forth, and whenever he was able to get that sack in the end zone, it completely changed the momentum. I do want to give a shout out to Wesley Bailey. He played really well, as I told you. Like even when he was getting pressures all game long. But I think Clev could end up with 12 to 15 sacks this year on the pace he's at.
Yeah, no, he could. I guess my final little takeaway before we officially turn the page, I don't think the sky is falling. Get the left side of the offensive line, get it figured out, and become Miller Moss. And I think you have a good football team. I think you have a really good football team.
A note for some people that maybe have the sky falling currently. Trevante Sylvester hasn't played yet. He's your starting left tackle when he gets back, more than likely. He's going to start the offensive line. And if you're new to the team and didn't watch last year as much, or you weren't as invested in who the guys were on the actual line, he was a solid part of that offensive line. He could play anywhere on that line. So when he gets back, you're going to see the pressure go down because the offensive line is going to do a lot more better. But it is good that Musa and all these new guys are able to get these reps early because it improves depth for those games like Clemson and Miami later on in the year.
Yep. No, I completely agree. That's going to be everyone's kind of holding their breath to that point in the season when he comes back, which hopefully is soon. Hopefully Pittsburgh, 3 weeks, Pittsburgh. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real need for the Bowling Green to just rest him, make sure he's ready for the big time games.
All right. Turning the page now, as you know, as you kind of hit it on earlier, James, Bowling Green is our next opponent, but we have a bye game in between there. I'm going to be honest with you. This is the happiest I've ever been about a early season bye game because you came out of a rock fight, brother. So, I mean, we're not going to speak too much on Bowling Green this week, to be honest. I think Bowling Green is a bottom half of the G5 team.
Mm-hmm.
We will cross that bridge tomorrow or next week. We will
Yep.
cross that bridge next week when we come back. Talking just kind of general college football around the country, though, this week, to fill in the second half of our show. Man, the ACC had a bad week.
Yep.
You had
I
a
think
good week,
overall,
then you had a bad week.
here's the thing: across the board, if you go across all the games, the first halves were actually not that bad. Because
Oh,
SMU
yeah.
went into the half ahead. Virginia Tech was ahead by 10 on Vanderbilt at the half. Let me go across here a little bit. Duke was in that game up until like the third quarter against Illinois. Like all three of those teams looked good in the first half. I don't know if just the physicality got to them or SMU kind of imploded on the defensive side of the ball, which was my concern with them. Their secondary was able to get beat. Sawyer at Baylor was able to throw for 440 yards against that secondary. They had a kicker of the year award, guy that was on the award list recipient, missed 2 kicks, a 57-yarder and a 41-yarder that could have kept the game going on. Vanderbilt just went in that second half and just dominated Virginia Tech.
Yeah. Kind of the way I'm looking at it right now with the league, it seems like the top half of the league, or not even the top half, the top quarter of the league is getting better, but the middle of the ACC it looks bad. We did our season projections, a couple of weeks ago, and
Yeah.
I was on there. I said, I don't think Cal's going to be very good. Cal looks decent, but everybody else just looks not good. One thing I really want to hit on, the Virginia Tech exclusively, man, that looks like a bad football team.
Yeah.
That's the nicest way to put it. It looks like a bad football team. So, hopefully, the ACC, you got a top 25 matchup, one would presume next week between Miami and South Florida. I don't think anybody saw that. You have that coming up. Well, we'll look to. So Virginia Tech, they look like a bad football team, and I find it concerning for the league. Just a little bit. Originally I was like 3 teams. 3 teams is still possible. You look at Miami, you look at Florida State, maybe Clemson or Louisville, but it's looking a lot less likely now. At the same time, though, I don't think the Big 12 looks that much better.
No, I think Big 12 looks like we touched on it in our preview that I don't think a team with them winning 10 games. You might have a situation where you have a bunch of 8-4 teams. Because Arizona State looked rough at times against Mississippi State. You touched on a game that's happening in the ACC next week. I don't think there's none bigger than Clemson going to Atlanta playing at Georgia Tech. That's a game. We thought week 1 we were going to see week 1 you kind of left. You kind of didn't know how to feel about either team. Both teams. Haynes King didn't play last week. Clemson struggled with Troy. All the makings for Georgia Tech to have a prove-it game. Are they on the top half of the conference, or are they still in the middle?
Yeah, and the thing I'll mention about the Clemson game, brother, Troy ain't particularly good in the Sun Belt.
Yeah.
That's concerning. At least with Louisville and James Madison, you can say James Madison's a pretty dang good team, and Louisville still covered. Troy ain't that good.
Mm-hmm.
And Klubnik, he's not looking like the guy that we thought he was.
No. And the biggest concern I have with Clemson, and I told you about it last week, their running game was not as nearly as prolific as it was. Randall, don't get me wrong, I know he's trying, but he is very much a wide receiver, and his change of direction and his ball vision is not there. Like, I think at one time I looked early third quarter and he had 6 carries for 21 yards, and it's against Troy.
Yep.
Not to discredit Troy, but that's not a top G5 defense, as you touched on. Like, you should definitely have more than 21 yards on 6 carries with that offensive line littered with 4 and 5 stars.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. It's just, it's one of those things where I still feel kind of confident about the Clemson game in particular. Granted, we'll see, what the offense looks like, give it time to immaculate a little bit. But just really interesting week for the ACC that I kind of wanted to touch on because I feel like it's kind of hard to ignore. Moving around, though, the rest, week 2, I wrongly called it a not very good slate last week. That was a phenomenal slate of football games.
One thing before we touch on the rest of the country. One more team on the ACC that I was not happy with. I don't know if you watched the game. Syracuse survived at home against UConn. That's the only word you can say it. I
They had
think
to
they
run
gave
suicides after the game.
like that Syracuse team has some problems on offense. They're having issues scoring against a UConn team that they got I think they lost 9 of their starting 11 on defense last year. So that's a new defense who wasn't supposed to be very good, but they went into the Carrier Dome. I will not call it anything else. It's the Carrier Dome, and you can argue they played a better game.
Yeah. Anyway, going though forward to the national conversation. Pretty good week of football. I think the SEC. People are gonna say they didn't look strong. I thought the SEC looked strong. I thought they did. I didn't think the Big Ten. They didn't have a very big slate. Illinois, man, they shouldn't have been that close against Duke. You're a top 10 team. Come on. Moving around though a little bit. I think the big game to talk about is the Florida game, obviously. And man, that was ugly.
Florida, in the past 4 or 5 years, they had, you know, it was different coaches. The same issues have kind of plagued them. It's discipline issues from the play against LSU that signaled Dan's firing to spitting in the face of a lineman last night. They gave 15 yards and made it so USF only needed 10 yards to get in field goal range. To the amount of holding calls and just straight up drops. All credit for USF. You showed up. You physical SEC football game team. But if you're Florida, this is one that you're gonna look back on and you're gonna say we beat ourselves. We shot ourselves in the foot constantly in that fourth quarter. We had multiple opportunities to shut the door and we couldn't do it. And that's the issue I think with the situation they currently got going on and they've had the last 5 years is they hold on too long and then before they realize it's time to move on, the season's over.
Yeah. I guess hitting on it, I think South Florida is quickly becoming one of the most interesting storylines of the early season of this college football year. The dominant win over Boise, the win against, the state school. Florida was in the top 15, weren't they?
They were 13th. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, dominant win, or not really dominant, but a win nonetheless. And now South Florida, I would assume they're top 25 this week. I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
I know they
I'm
weren't
sorry?
ranked in the poll, but I suspect they will be in the AP.
No, I would assume so. If not, the AP voters are insane because they have one of the better resumes in the country at this point. They played 2 quality teams and won. They're going into Miami, and that is a interesting matchup because I know Miami, they beat up on Notre Dame, but Notre Dame had question marks, and Miami still has some of those question marks. And you get a motivated South Florida team in there. I think you can make an argument for it to be game day. Honest to God.
The game day question, I can't say because you got a Tennessee-Georgia game that's going to be a big-time football game later on in that week. We'll touch on that game.
Yes.
But
yes, we will.
USF, I'm concerned about their D tackle. They had D tackle go down on that last defensive drive. I forgot his last name. He was the one they got from Vandy. From what I've heard, he should be okay to play, but that's one thing to watch. That's going to affect a lot because Miami wants to run the ball because Carson Beck likes to play a lot of play action. The one thing I'll say Miami has trouble with traditionally is a scrambling quarterback. And the USF is not afraid to run that quarterback.
No, they're not. But my interesting question for you, and I'm not picking South Florida to win this game at all. That's not what I'm doing. Let's say South Florida wins, and I would assume they would win out after that. And you have a 13-0 South Florida with wins over Florida and Miami. Is that a top 4 team? Is that a bye-worthy team? Because I think it is.
Here's the thing. Early on in the year, I think it's yes. But you got to think about the trajectory of both teams. That's the reality of it. Because the Americans not very good this year, outside of Tulane and South Florida. But I think it can be, but it relies heavily on what Florida and Miami do the rest of the year. And I think
the way. Sorry.
I still think they also need to rely on Boise figuring themselves out as the year goes on, so they can add that as a quality win at the end of the year as well.
Well, the reason I bring it up is we talked about the Big 12 a little bit earlier, and it wouldn't surprise me if the winner of the Big 12 is a 9-win team. At that point, it's kind of similar to the conversation we had last year. If you don't remember, around week 10 or so, there was a point in time where we were looking at the Big 12 when we're saying, they may, you had it was right before the Navy Notre Dame game, I believe, where you
Mhm.
had G5 representatives ranked above the Big 12 and the CFP. I wouldn't surprise me if you see that situation again. If they
Yeah.
win, obviously, this is a big if they win. I don't think they'll win. And truthfully, I think South Florida will probably be like a 13, 14 point underdog. But it's a very interesting thought, like just a little thought experiment I wanted to throw out to you.
I completely agree. South Florida is it's got to be the most interesting team of football right now because there's so many variables that have gone into their 2-0. You play a Boise State team that's coming off their first game without Ashton Genty, who made up for 78% of their production last year, rushed for over 2,000 yards. How are those running backs going to have? Well, they fumbled twice in the first quarter. You had to be a little bit cute with it and have a fake punt touchdown. Don't get me wrong, you caught them off guard, but you had to do stuff to beat that Boise State team to separate yourself. You still beat them 34-7. But that was a lot closer of a game if everybody the ones that watched it know that game was not a blowout the whole game. Florida, you're looking at a team that there's so many questions with Florida. Florida's going into this year where they're like, well, he got to win 8 games or he's fired. So you're going out into the year with a coach on the hot seat, and he knows he's on the hot seat. And they've had offensive issues with the play calling in the last couple of years. You got a dude over there in DJ Lagway and a littered wide receiver, and one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country in Florida. Ball goes out in the first quarter, so you see a lot more of their backup running back throughout the game. This is not to discredit USF, but there's been variables at play that still leave you to have question marks. And I think Miami's a team that's more solid in what they are. Don't get me wrong, they're coached by Mario Cristobal, but I feel like Miami's the first team they're going to face that you don't got to guess what Miami's going to do to you. And Miami's going to be that defense is going to be prepared to stop the run.
Yes.
It's just a
Yeah.
matter of what can be schemed up against it.
Yeah, I mean, you got a Ruben Bain sized issue that you got to address. And that's not something that all due credit to Boise State and Florida. There ain't no Ruben Bain on those rosters. But kind of transitioning though, because the Florida talk's been a little rolling. In your opinion, who do you think is the first or Power 4 coach to get fired?
So I told you I've been back and forth on this. I feel like it's going to be Mike Gundy for the sole reason of I feel like he was talked to at the end of last year about the possibility of it. And so they gave him this year more so because of how long he's been there and everything he's done. And Saturday was an embarrassment. I understand it's Oregon. Good every year. They're really good. It's hard to go into Eugene and win. But the fact that you made comments throughout the week and you showed up and it was 69-3 at the end of the third quarter, that was an embarrassment to the program. And the thing you leave away that's the most concerning part is not that you got blowed out by Oregon. It's the fact that the fight was not there at the end. It felt like the people were just going through the motions. There was nobody trying to get the extra yard in the third quarter to try to start making plays to build toward the next week. It was just like everybody was just there to be there because they had to be. I just think secondly, Billy Napier's in trouble just because he lost the USF game and his next slate's awful. You get Miami, Texas, Georgia, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, who's coming off a win against a ranked Arizona State team. Ole Miss, and then you finally get a game that you're going to be favored in Kentucky all the way at week 9 or 10. So you could have like a 6-7 losing streak at that time. But honestly, I don't think either one of them make it to week 8.
Yeah. So personally, I'm going with Brent Pry. I think that the fan base is over it. It's gotten worse. You were watching that team getting progressively worse by the quarter. And it's a reasonable buyout. I think it's a situation where you could see a midseason firing. Truthfully, I think Mike Gundy is probably gone at the end of the year. I don't know if it's a midseason thing. I feel like there's a little bit more respect in that situation, but that's just my personal feelings on it. And then Sunbelt Billy, I mean, brother, start looking for coordinator jobs now because like you just stated on it. I think realistically, you're looking at like a 7-loss win streak or 7-loss streak. And, it's a reasonable buyout. They have the money for it. They had the money last year. They did the whole rally, the boosters thing, and I could see it, ending very soon. But I'm going to go with Pry just because I think it's a bit of a more manageable buyout there. And I think they have more people in place to kind of take over the program at the time being. And I really don't think Brent Pry's coaching Virginia Tech by the time Louisville plays him.
I can see it.
But that's going to kind of wrap us up. We're going to now transition into our pick segment. Boy, oh boy, I had a bad week last week.
I think we both had under the average last week.
Yeah. Again, not a professional gambler. I'm sorry.
We got Army, though.
We got Army. Hey, got one. We're not professional gamblers. We're not even particularly good at it. Play along if you want. These are all going to be moneyline picks. James, what are our games this week?
You get
Okay.
Tennessee and Georgia.
All right. So our first game is Tennessee and Georgia. That game is at Neyland. Personally, for me, I really respect what Tennessee's doing as a program. I think they have really built something very nice there for the SEC level of play. I think they have a solid roster. But at the end of the day, I have a few questions marks about the quarterback. Personally, I have not been overtly impressed with Aguilar. At the same time, though, looking at Georgia, looking at the Dogs, great roster, probably the best ran program in college football, in my opinion. Just Kirby Smart does phenomenal things. Just don't give your kids Hellcats. Give me the Dogs. I think the roster is a little bit better. I'm a little bit more comfortable with what they're doing on offense right now.
This game is going to be an atmosphere. It's probably going to be game day. The last few years, Tennessee has played really well in the night games. The crowd's going to show up. It's going to be loud. Georgia has a lot of question marks around Gunnar Stockton. Is he the guy? I think Tennessee has a really, really good running offense for the SEC. Their offensive line's good. Their secondary is very good. But the only thing I keep going back to is that Georgia defensive line. How is Joey Aguilar going to handle it? I don't think he handles it well, and I think Georgia wins by 3 touchdowns.
All right. What do we got for us next on the slate?
You got Wisconsin coming in to Titletown as they battle Alabama.
This is a game. First and foremost, I am sure that that little nice lady from Alabama is a very sweet woman, but I hope to God she does not hit the Powerball for Kalen DeBoer's sake. Alabama. We've talked a lot about Alabama on this show, and it seems like we always talk a lot about Alabama. I think Alabama has a lot of question marks on the offense. And I think that for the most part, they're still trying to find their identity. This is not the Saban culture of old, and there's been a lot of issues. At the same time, the Luke Fickell experiment has been a complete failure. And that's putting it very nicely. I mean, don't get me wrong. You could see him gone at the end of the season. I'm giving this game to Bama. You know, it's in Bryant-Denny. I think Alabama has a much better roster. They get it together, and this kind of makes the people in T-Town feel a little bit better.
Alabama gets back their odds favorite to be the number 1 D tackle in the draft, and Keenan back this week. He's going to wreck the game of Wisconsin up. Shout out Mason Rager is currently on Wisconsin's defensive line. He's going to have a time because I do believe Jam Miller's predicted to play this week. I believe Ty Sitson showed some signs of improvement last week, albeit lesser competition and the Warhawks. I think Alabama wins this game, and I honestly feel like you start seeing Keelan Russell in the third quarter.
What I will say is I'm praying for Kalen DeBoer if Alabama loses this football game.
I'm right with you on that one. Speaking of Sunbelt Billy, he goes to Death Valley on Saturday night.
I just want to point out, we pick these games before Saturday. Give me LSU by a lot of points.
Here's my thing. I don't want to get too much into this. I want to say Harold Perkins might be the best linebacker in the country.
Well, he's damn good, man.
I've been behind Harold Perkins since he's a freshman.
He is good.
Their secondary is legit. They have a legit secondary. It's not hard to throw. I don't think it's as good as they looked against Clemson because I'll touch on that later. I don't think Clemson's offense is as good as people thought it was. I think Garrett Nussmeier has an embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it hard to see how Florida is going to be able to stop this team from being able to throw the ball. And I think it's LSU. I think it's going to be like a 35-10 game.
All right. Garrett Nussmeier is a dog.
He is an embarrassment of riches. His offensive line, don't get me wrong, they're getting into the swing of things. Similar to what we said about Louisville. They're going to gel. It's going to look better. Florida has a legit defensive line, except one of the better edges in the SEC. As much as I want to say this game's going to be close, it's not going to be. I take the Tigers. Next up on the list, we have a Big 12, Pac-12 kind of game. Again, we picked this before Saturday. Oregon State goes to Lubbock and plays Texas Tech. This could be a sneaky one.
I mean, I think Texas Tech is a very well-constructed roster. I will say I think Texas Tech, though, is still having a little bit of a hard time gelling, especially kind of similar to Louisville on the offensive line here. With all that being said, give me them by a lot. I just I don't trust Oregon State at all. I don't think they're a particularly good program. They brought in the kid from Duke last year, right?
Yeah, they got Malik Murphy.
Yeah, I'm not a Malik Murphy fan. Give me Texas Tech.
So they bring Malik Murphy in, and I think the price tag I've heard floated around, I don't know the exact number, but it's like $3 to $5 million a year for him.
That is obscene.
It's very much throwing all your money in one pool and just hoping it works. The only issue is it's not worked, and you're playing against a pool that's like times 100 what you're available to spend. Texas Tech spent their treasure chest and more this offseason. Just in general talent and athleticism, Texas Tech wins this ball game by 20. This next one's going to be could be a sneaky fun one. You get the Razorbacks playing the Fighting Kiffins in Oxford.
All right. This is what I'm gonna say. Let me do my thing here. Ole Miss. They got a team this year. I still don't really know how to feel about them, to be completely honest. They did the typical Ole Miss week 1 thing where they beat an FCS team by 70 points. They go into Kroger Field and they didn't look particularly good, in my opinion, but neither did Kentucky. I'm still, there's a lot of question marks about Ole Miss. Arkansas, though, for my Louisville fans out there, if you like mid-2000s Louisville football, go watch an Arkansas game. They have completely turned that program around, I feel like, in about a 12-month span where Sam Pittman was on the hot seat so much. Bobby Petrino has done wonders for that offense. He just sent out a pretty cute little tweet linking Arkansas to Louisville about 10 minutes ago. I really like this program. I like the direction that Arkansas is on. I think Arkansas gets the upset here, and hey, man, go Hogs.
Okay, so this game's a game I was contemplating for the past 48 hours since we said this is going to be on the pick 'em. My thing I keep going back to is Taylor Green's a very good dual threat, but he has the tendency to throw some questionable passes. Austin Simmons did the same thing against Kentucky. He's had 4 interceptions, 2 in the first quarter of both games. One of those against the FCS team. And I feel like Arkansas is a team that offensively can be able to take advantage of that more so than Kentucky, the FCS team, could have done. I think this game's a game that goes down to the wire. I think it's won by Lacey, the running back for Ole Miss. I think he runs for over 100 yards. And I feel like you're looking at a game that classic SEC 24-17. It's in Oxford. They're going to be loud. 24-17 seems like a good number to me, Mississippi. And next up, before we go to our game of the week, we got our G5 game of the week. It's App State at Southern Miss.
Yeah, man. So a little App State Southern Miss action. This game is not as cute for the G5 as it looked to be a few weeks ago. You've obviously seen the major, kind of swell up of South Florida, which we talked a lot about. And I think JMU's made a very good case from the Louisville game. Southern Miss, they've looked good at times, but there's been a major consistency issue throughout both their games. App State has looked very consistent. They're a very steady hand in the Sun Belt. Give me App State.
App State had everything it wanted and more this weekend against Lindenwood. I know late game was 20-13, coming off a win against Charlotte, a team that defensively gave North Carolina some issues, so that's a quality defense. Charlotte, I don't know how much their offense is this year. With that being said, Southern Miss has looked a little off. Don't get me wrong, it's basically all of Marshall's guys from last year just transferred down with the addition of some other pieces. I think App State's they've had the same staff forever. Know their scheme. The game's at Southern Miss. I don't think it matters. I think App State wins this game. I think it's a game to watch, though, if you want some good G5 football. I think this game could be close.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good game, and that's kind of the way I look at it. It's just the consistency of App State. It's very hard to go against them in these sorts of games. Going on to our next game, though.
Are you ready for some ACC football?
This is a big one.
This game will tell you all you need to know about both of these teams' placement in the ACC this year, and you could leave this as a Louisville fan in a lot better of a mindset for a certain big game on a Friday night later on in the year. You get the Clemson Tigers coming off a subpar performance against Troy at home and a performance against LSU that many around the country say they did not think they looked good in. And you go to a Georgia Tech team with a healthy Haynes King after he did not start this week with something to prove.
All right, cool. You know what this game feels like to me, James?
What?
This game feels a lot to me like that Louisville Clemson game last season, and I think it looks very similar to that. I think Haynes King is the toughest SOB in college football. I think Georgia Tech can run the damn ball as much as they please on Clemson. I think Clemson's been struggling on offense. And what's really concerning for Clemson is those issues you saw against Louisville last year, and then you saw in the college football playoff with the physicalness of the line of scrimmage. Well, they just poked their head out against Troy. And I don't know if you know this about Brent Key. He consistently has one of the best line of scrimmages in college football. I think Brent Key's a hell of a coach. I think this is a Brent Key's his signature win, and I think that the Yellow Jackets get it done, and I think they beat them by 2 touchdowns, if you want my honest opinion.
So I'm with you for a majority of this. I think this Georgia Tech team has a lot of similarities to what Louisville was last year. I think Clemson reminds me a lot of what they were last year. I feel like they're significantly worse in terms of their running attack. I feel like they're not very dynamic. I feel like they're very one-dimensional. The one place I think this game ends is I think can't leave the fact Clemson has one of the better defensive lines in the ACC. If they can hold anything, they got that. You didn't perform well in the first half against Troy. I think they take that as a challenge and they show up next Saturday. I think Clemson wins this game, but I think it's a game that's just they're going to have to fight for. I got Clemson 20-14 in a game where they have to score late.
Yeah, and what I will say, if you're a Louisville fan, watch that football game. Tune into that game because that's going to be a game that we're going to look back on later this season. And that's a game the coaching staff is going to look back on later this season. But with all of that being said, a little bit of a longer show today, very college football national heavy, just because we're kind of going into the bye week. Next week when we come back to you guys, we're going to get more into talking about, actual Louisville football, which is exciting to say. Yeah. Any final closing thoughts on the James Madison game?
You leave 2 and Clark's injured. We'll get more on that as it's released. You got some guys on the bench that should hopefully show up. JMU's a real good football team. The sky should not be falling. We'll see where it goes. That JMU team, do not be shocked if they're a 12-win team here late December.
I completely agree, man. And with all that being said, to the viewers, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check us out on Twitter over at the Cards Companion, coming over to you weekly with live shows. And sub to this page. If you're not on YouTube, you're going to see weekly content. And then we're going to start busting in a little bit of onesie, twosies here and there. James, as always, thank you so much. The viewers, thank you so much. We will see y'all next week. Go Cards.
Go Cards.